Hi, I've had another request video of someone whose handle is teaspoon. Thank you so much for this interesting project. Wanting to know all about the differences between the classes of people and their headdresses and headwear in the medieval period. Now, looking into this was a huge project, but to give an overall view, the lower classes would probably have been the same for decades really, just for workers, head wraps, coifs, things like that. Things like this with head wraps to keep the hair clean and tidy when working. Things like this head wrap right at the top there that to protect from things like lice and dirt, and then straw hats basically to protect from the sun. But the more interesting project in this is going to be the differences between the upper classes and the new middling sort. Did the middle classes arrive? Well, officially in the Victorian period with the Industrial Revolution. But the term the middling sort happened in the Georgian period, the 1700s, when there were people emerging that were sort of in the middle between the peasants and the aristocracy. Unofficial terms, we can go back to the 1400s really, when there was a start of a middling few with the emergence of people like merchants, shopkeepers, lawyers and doctors. And in more unofficial terms to do with fashion, I think we can go back to the 1300s, when there was a headwear became more defined between the classes. From 1066 to around the 1300s, headwear was sort of basically the same for all classes of people. You can see my video previously for wealthy people back then, which was still sort of veils, head wraps, wimples and simple woolen caps for men. In the 1300s, however, there was a slight divide. For the peasants, however, there was still this sort of main head wrap or coif for the workers, and these hoods for warmth. And here's a farmer in his straw hat. The wealthy were wearing these sort of styles throughout the 1300s. This is like a head veil with a fancy fillet. There was the torque headdress with a veil and a wimple. Reticulated headdresses like this called the crespine and the crespinettes. Later on, the gaufred headdress or the nebule, also called the carousela, also known as the frilled or the ruffled veil. Men still wore coifs, but they now got these very nice smart wool hats. There was also the bicocket, which was the Robin Hood style of hat, in a few different sorts of style. Also for the wealthy, later on then, there was the bourrelet or the padded roll, or what was called the muffin cap. So let's now look at the more wealthy peasant. Can you see this ruffled veil, gaufred headdress with a hat on the top? There's a working lady here, maybe with her own business. She's got a simpler style of torque and barbette with the crespine at the back. Here we have a simpler style of bourrelet headdress that's made of wicker, compared to a wealthy bourrelet lady's padded roll hat with her crespinettes at the side. This bourrelet turned into what is called the escoffion, that went into more of a heart shape and larger crespinettes with a veil on the top. This was for wealthier people. And the middling sort might have worn something like this. It was a complete netted snood sort of headdress. You can see a little fillet in the middle there. You can also see now the bicocket hat that was for rich and poor people, and men and women. Now in the 1400s, the gentry started to appear because we have rising stars like yeomen, who were independent owning farmers, burghers who were townspeople, that sort of even people with their own business like butchers, bakers, blacksmiths, potters, artists and stonemasons. So the wealthy people in the 1400s were still wearing the escoffion, something called the flower pot hennin, the steeple hennin and the butterfly hennin. and the horned headdress. Men were wearing what was called sugarloaf hats, acorn style hats, and the chaperon. Now for the middling sort, we're still wearing the bicocket. And here's a simpler sort of padded roll. And here are simpler sort of head wraps and horned headdresses. Lovely muffin caps for the men. And simpler style chaperons also, head wraps for the men. And also these lovely simple woolen hats now. And something like this. Now in the 1500s we go more into the Tudor period, and we have the start of the Tudor period with the steeple gable hood. This is all for the wealthy people. Later on we've got the box gable hood, came with Catherine of Aragon, and then we have the rounded French hood that came with Anne Boleyn. And here is a middling sort of style of French hood, if you like, that's just a plain draped hood. And for everyday wear or people that weren't so wealthy, there was just a hood without a veil called a bonne grace. And here are simpler styles of Tudor hoods for the middling sort, and lots of lovely varieties of hood over the Tudor period like this. Now for the wealthy sort, obviously there were these posh hats, sometimes with a coif underneath, or these lovely woolen hats here, maybe for riding. And the everyday man would have worn a simple hat like this one, or this style. And here's another picture, Thomas More's son. And another perhaps everyday lady's style of hat. But what I would say and like to finish on is that there would have been obviously crossovers and differing styles of opulent and simple styles for people that with wealthy and status, and poverty divide depending on how wealthy you were, or if you just wanted a day in or something to relax in, or if you were going somewhere special, you just put on something a bit better, because look here, this is Anne Boleyn, the Queen. Now, whether she'd started to wear this as her favour was dropping, I don't know, or whether she just fancied a day in doing nothing, maybe a duvet day like we get today, and she's just wearing a simple style of hood. So, you know, we can't really be definite on the divides, but I hope that's given you an overall view to teaspoon. Thank you very much for your request video. If you've enjoyed another historical costume video, do join me again next time. Until then, bye!